everyone, my name is Zoya. I'm a junior in the Department of Molecular Biology. I'm also pursuing a certificate in global health and health policy, so it seems fitting that I did an internship in global health this summer. This summer I interned at Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey, which is located in New Brunswick, New Jersey. And my direct advisor's name this summer was Dr. Jin Cheng Wan, who's a principal investigator in the Labudi lab that's run by Dr. Stephen Labudi. And Dr. Labudi also holds the title of Director of RCNJ. And Dr. Wan's research focuses on a familial cancer syndrome called multiple endocrine neoplasia type 1, which is abbreviated as MEN1. And it's a familial cancer syndrome that is characterized by tumors that form most commonly in glands in the endocrine system. And in a couple of years back, Dr. Wan did a previous study where he basically figured out a working model for the biological mechanism in which MEN1 tumors form. And a key observation from this working model is that this enzyme called DNA methyltransferase 1, DNMT1, is overactive in tissues that are suffering from MEN1. And using this observation, Dr. Wan conducted a more recent study that looked at a potential therapy in a preclinical setting for MEN1 tumors. And my main job this summer was to write a draft manuscript on this project. And my main objective in taking on this internship was I really wanted to learn about how investigating the biological mechanisms behind cancer formation could be a useful way of approaching cancer research. And I hope that by taking part in an actual cancer lab this summer, I could get a better idea of how I would want to approach my own independent research as I enter my junior year at Princeton. My main work profile, so I attended Labudi lab meetings weekly. I was assigned some previous literature from Dr. Wan from his lab to understand the working model, and I was given graphs and tissue imaging and just data from the DNMT1 inhibitor project to annotate and interpret. And then that was in preparation for my main job, which was creating the draft manuscript of the project. And to reflect during lab meetings, I got to learn a lot about not just Dr. Wan's research, but also the approaches of other investigators that were working in the lab. I got to hear from potential collaborators about their work and graduate students as they presented their own presentations for potential board exams. And a really unique part of my experience from this summer was learning about how research in global health continues despite a global health crisis like a pandemic. So I got to learn more about what Rutgers Cancer Institute of New Jersey was doing and preparing to do to continue researching despite being in a pandemic. And as I mentioned, crafting the draft manuscript on the DNMT1 inhibitor project was my main job this summer. And to talk more about the project, it used mouse models to think about the scope of therapies for patients with MEN1 in a preclinical setting by inhibiting the overactive DNMT1 enzyme that was in the working model that Dr. Wan previously identified. And to do this, Dr. Wan used these two novel DNMT1 inhibitor molecules that were designed by a partner of the lab called the National Cancer Institute. And this first figure here is actually kind of an outline of the project itself and what they did and what the two goals were. The two goals were to see if MEN1 tumor genesis itself could be prevented in earlier mice by using the inhibitors, or if the tumors that already formed could be used as an effective treatment method in the mouse model. And it was being compared to the PBS control group. And to talk more about what I learned, I got to learn about the process that Dr. Wan's lab used to approach cancer research. So they started many years back by making a working model on the biological mechanism itself of MEN1 tumor genesis. And now we're thinking more about preclinical setting and using what they learned from that biological pathway to apply it into a potential treatment option. I was also able to see a lot of the concepts and tools that I learned about in my mole classes at Princeton being applied in a real laboratory setting, which is really exciting. And I'm really grateful for the guidance that I received from my advisors throughout this process, from Dr. Wan and Dr. Labudi, and for having the opportunity to co-author a paper on a project that I think is really exciting and relevant and important. And for the other figure that's in this reflection section, this is actually an example of MEN1 tumor staining. So the left and middle photos are tumors or tissues that were treated with the DNMT1 inhibitors, and then the right photo is an example of the PBS control group, meaning that it wasn't treated with either inhibitor. And you can see that the PBS control group actually has more tumor-like symptoms compared to the two that were treated with inhibitors, and that they have smaller islets. And looking ahead and seeing what I learned this summer to be applied in the future, I learned scientific writing and data interpretation on a really big scale, which are super important skills for me to learn as I enter my junior and senior years at Princeton. I also developed an interest in the approach to cancer biology that Dr. Wan is using in looking at methylation patterns and epigenetics, and these are concepts that I found really interesting learning about in high school biology, so this could be a potential route for me to approach my own thesis work. Questions? I'm really interested in the process of applying for like the submission of a medical manuscript, the next steps. And actually currently Dr. Wan has submitted an abstract on the DNMT1 inhibitor project to a research symposium. So that's kind of the phase that the project is in right now. And I'm also interested in looking at the next steps from taking what we've learned from the DNMT1 inhibitor project in a preclinical setting and using what was learned from that project to a potential clinical trial to help actual patients suffering from MEN1. And to conclude, I got to learn more about the multi-step process of approaching cancer research. And I've also been able to conclude that approaches that start by understanding the biological mechanism of cancer itself can be really useful to global health, because cancer is not a disease that necessarily looks at the environment, but sometimes can simply occur from spontaneous mutation, and so it affects people all around the world. And Dr. Wan was able to identify a biological mechanism first in the working model and then apply it to preclinical setting therapy, which is, I found, a really interesting and useful way of approaching the research. And to finish off, I'd like to take a moment to sincerely thank Dr. Wan for being so passionate about teaching me about his work and for giving me the opportunity to co-author his paper. I'm really thankful to Dr. Labudi as well for welcoming me into the Labudi Lab, and to RCNJ for this opportunity. And I'd really like to thank the Center for Health and Wellbeing and the Internships in Global Health for giving me this opportunity this summer, for choosing me for it, and for funding it, because it has been such a rewarding experience. So thank you so much.